Tony, what are the barriers to collaboration happening? I mean, you mentioned that in your answer as one of the key things we need to do. We all know it doesn't happen a lot of the time, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad. But how do we get those network effects to work in drug discovery and development?
So I think, I think Paul's made a great point about not believing that all the innovation happens internally within an organization. We know the best science happens where the best science happens, which isn't always within the same company. And the notion that if your original question was around size, and I think the two answers go together in a way. So if you think size can be a disadvantage, because if you've got a fixed infrastructure and you're not willing to reduce that infrastructure and redesign an organization for the science that we have today, not 15 or 20 years ago, then you're missing an opportunity. So there's a real opportunity in our industry to redesign the infrastructure base for the science we have today. But the science that we have today is coming from every corner. It's coming from the academy, it's coming from other companies, it's coming from private companies in the venture space. And I think the notion of both A, being willing to acknowledge that science is coming from other places, B, that there are new approaches that are going to be required, not just on the discovery side, but on the regulatory side to accommodate that. So let's view the government as a partner as well and build on what we're seeing as a new trajectory potentially for the FDA in speeding some of these therapies to market. And I think it's dialogue. I think some of it is as simple as being available, being present, and being in the discourse around how do we do this better and faster, breaking some of the rules of tradition.
Now, we're going to keep on this question for a bit, but if there are any questions from the audience, we would love to hear them as we finish up this. So, okay, just a second, sir. A mic will be coming to you. But there are disadvantages to collaboration. That's why it's been so hard, aren't there? I mean, don't any of you see a risk? I mean, people talk about open source and open data, and what if all the data were public? Isn't that potentially losing the advantages that you have in your... If you're really good at neuroscience, George, do you really want to be giving your best people to Mikhail to work on his neuroscience project? I mean, how do you...
He's a nice guy, why not? Right? No, obviously. And look, there are certain types of knowledge, certain insights that I think can be shared and should be shared. And there are some problems that are large enough that they're not going to be solved. And I don't know where the line is between information that is for the good of the public and for the good of the company's public, and where information should be proprietary. You can name the two extremes, but there's a big gray area in the middle where I think different people can have different opinions. But collaboration doesn't necessarily mean the information becomes public, right? There are all different kinds of collaboration, and I don't think any of us think we can do everything inside of our own companies. And I think everybody is working about new ways to work with academia, to work with other companies, to work with the regulatory agencies, and those different models are evolving as the
Matt, if
people
I
are trying
just build
to work
on
that
that,
out.
I think we have to be comfortable with pre-competitive projects, areas where we can pool knowledge, information, and resources and answer the common base of questions that are going to advance the field of science. Some people call it co-opetition, so cooperative competition, but I think we've got to get comfortable with that in the notion of how we break down some of the barriers to collaboration.
To build on what you said, another great example in the electronic industry that shows the difference between staying in silos or collaborating is comparing Sony to Apple. So Sony had the leading capabilities in the music industry, but every different division of Sony had their own silo. Apple had just a couple of capabilities on their platforms, but the willingness to look at how you can connect the dot with internal and, as Tony spoke, to external network, and built the iPod that completely revolutionized how you can access music, and surpassed Sony with logarithms. So I think it really tells us, define what is your strengths, be willing to share and leverage that value, and move with pace forward.
Well, another another case in the semiconductor industry. As I was at the board of EMEC, the consortium with the semiconductor industry, and they bring together 1,800 people working on platforms from different companies in order to advance the basic technology to a level that they can compete on the next level technology. I think in industry, if you look at you asked initially the question on HIV, what made the breakthrough in HIV? In the end, was a collaboration between FDA and the industry to validate viral load as a biomarker. That was the real kickoff of the new drug development, and that was a large collaboration where everybody put their data into a database, validated viral load, and that became the surrogate marker for approval. And from then on, you could go from clinical endpoints to 6-month endpoint on viral load and approval. And so those are examples where we have to collaborate. We have to collaborate in cancer on biomarkers, in Alzheimer on biomarkers to accelerate the space. Probably on validating of new targets. There is so much new science at the moment in the world that we have to do that. And then what we are doing at this moment in the industry on capabilities and Transcelerate, the new company we established across the large pharmaceutical industry to do clinical trials, to optimize clinical trials.
Bring new efficiencies.
Yeah, and to create new efficiencies. And
in the spirit of collaboration, I want to know what this guy has to say.
yeah.
Hi there. I'm Joe Flower, the Change Project. I was interested in the panel's reaction to a common criticism or concern leveled at the pharmaceutical industry, based on the fact that it is entirely for profit, and these are companies driven by the need to fund themselves by making a profit on something. And the criticism is that this greatly skews the selection of what projects to push forward over all the opportunities that arise, all the compounds you might be looking at, skewed toward drugs that are patentable, that are so that we don't use older compounds, we don't investigate other uses of, say, folk compounds, drugs that would have to be put in wide use and have to be taken every day, possibly over a lifetime, things like statins, for instance, as opposed to something that you take once and it cures you. Things that would be of wide use for wealthy populations that could pay for such drugs. And these priorities do not interface well with what is the best, the most benefit toward mankind. I'd like to hear what the panel thinks about how does this actually affect the choice of which projects to push forward and do greater research in.
So do you guys think, is our for-profit pharmaceutical system in line with picking projects that are of greater use to mankind, of greater help?
Well, of course, we are a business which is in the stock market, and we have to have our profits and a return on investment. So we don't have enough.
Well, that's true for the family-owned companies too. So
that's correct.
Yeah.
But that is how a business operates. So you have to be profitable in order to continue to invest, and especially in the pharmaceutical industry, you have to make significant profits in order to justify the risk taking. But I think many of the pharmaceutical companies, they have like a balanced approach. If you do HIV drugs, you have responsibility to the rest of the world to make sure that your HIV drugs are available. We discovered as an organization, my organization discovered a new target for TB, the first new one in 40 years. We are also people, physicians, scientists who are committed to doing good in the world. And as a team, we decided we're going to bring this drug. And so last week we had a positive opinion with the FDA. I hope we'll get it there. But that drug is like much smaller, maybe profitable. We'll see how it evolves because we need to still further study it. So I think each of the companies is prepared, at least ours is prepared to use our science and to know how to contribute to global health with vaccines, with infectious disease drugs. But you have to have the balance between what you can do and for that and what you have to do for the Western world.
And the biomedical ecosystem can also work together to take on challenges in new ways. Rare diseases, I think, has been one example how, on one hand, incentives have been provided by regulators when it comes to the approval process and data exclusivity. And the patient groups have been very crucial here in being the voice of the patients, making the unmet need and the natural disease history of patients available, and often actually partnered with pharma to make sure that the early search phase can get funds and move into a phase where an industry that needs to have return of investment to be sustainable can bring the best of these two forces, new treatments, in a way that also can give a decent return of investment. We have recently a really exciting partnership with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation that really brings, these two parts of society together and can create benefit for many stakeholders.
To the
I have a
one
follow-up
there.
question to the gentleman. I'm Pamela Grace from Pantheropia, and I have a question about innovation in pharma's business model. Would it be possible for pharma to just divest discovery and put it into, and take advantage of all the small companies because they can do it better and cheaper and faster? People work better for themselves than they do for a large company. I think that's an established fact.
If it would be that simple, I think we would have probably done it years ago. But a lot of the breakthrough transformational technologies, as I alluded to initially, require really size, resilience, and scale. And I gave a couple of examples where we go from the most sophisticated chemistry towards very advanced pharmaceutical properties. And
scientists developed Epogen for Amgen.
yeah, but of course there are a lot of great areas where you can partner with small companies, but there are also many areas where it's very difficult for small companies to take on big challenges. So for me, it's not an either or, it's really an and, but you need to be very deliberate in where you apply your scale and where you partner with small innovators.
So I would say that's a bad idea. And it's a bad idea because I don't think we can leave these important questions of science to the random organization of a private company that will choose to focus on any number of diseases that could be big or small. There's something here where scale actually does make a difference when you have the collective mindset of an organization focused on finding an answer. And I think Paul's example of HIV is one of the best examples in the last 2 decades of how the collective minds of science and the academy came together and addressed a really critical problem. That's not a problem I would have wanted to leave to the private industry space.
I think it's also a myth to think that people in small entrepreneurial companies are harder working than people in the big companies. I mean, certainly big companies have a lot of 9-to-5ers. I'm sorry?
You work harder for yourself than you do for
Well, maybe you do. Not everybody does. I was in a small startup company for a lot of years. We worked really hard. We put in a lot of hours. That's absolutely true. When I look at our company now and we're getting ready to file, drug applications with the regulatory agencies, and a real example, the question is, do you want to file it earlier and ask people to work through the holidays or not?
Sorry.
And so my view to the team of people was say, look, we're in a marathon here, not a sprint. Take some time off, and we'll a week later is okay. And they said, no, we'll do this. So voluntarily, we have people working through the holidays. They work weekends. They work nights. I don't think it's true that people in big companies are 9-to-5ers and people working for themselves are.
Pamela, I've been in both settings. And I can tell you that there are advantages to the large pharma approach to science discovery and to the biotech and private scale of discovery. And I think this ecosystem has to find a way to allow both to coexist.
What
I wanna allow one.
resonated just very briefly when I heard George and Tone here is that it's about the culture you need to create. And we put a lot of emphasis to make everyone feel that it's their company, that they own the resources and are responsible for the outcome. And that type of culture you can create in a large or a small company. It's very much to the individuals and the type of environment you provide them with. One recent example, Xeljanz, that we are just got approved as the first new pill for rheumatoid arthritis with disease-modifying properties in more than 10 years. We stayed persistent with that project for 15 years. I don't see there would be many very small companies that would have survived. And that would probably be a very impactful new treatment solution for a variety of inflammatory conditions, and the main one now is rheumatoid arthritis. So again, you have to take those big problems depending on your scope and capability, and I think we all play different role and together can advance medical practice and human health.
One last question here. You, sir.
So Anna and I are President and Chief Operating Officer of WellDoc. I want to go back to this theme of innovation. In the 1990s, Cisco revolutionized the telecom industry, the equipment industry, by stopping to sell the widget and selling the solution and value around the widget. And in many ways, people followed their path. Today in pharma, regardless of the drug, regardless of the disease state, everybody suffers from poor compliance and persistence. So the number of refills, people taking the drug the way they should, it doesn't matter. It's at the 23 to 38 percentile range after a 6th or 12th refill. The question for the panel is, do you see an opportunity to go, if you would, around the pill and beyond the pill, and start to create that same kind of services-based model that perhaps diversifies your effort? You're not just building drugs.
Okay, sir, I need to stop. Does one of you, Tony, give a quick answer?
So the quick answer, I think, is that we have to evolve the business model. The evolution that's happening on the digital frontier and the social media frontier are forcing us to interact with new offerings. So I predict within 10 years it's pill plus services that address some of these opportunities. So we have to evolve ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be extinct.
And that's in a lot of areas has happened. I mean, that's what rare diseases is. But thank you very much, guys. This was great. Thanks for coming here. And now it's our time to get off the stage.
Thank you.